Well, hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, the 2025 Healthcare Benchmarks Improved Talent Acquisition with Insights, presented by symplr in partnership with Rogue Hire. My name is Pat Basserman, and I am a Senior Product Marketing Manager here at symplr. I will be your moderator for today's session. We know your time is valuable, so thank you for being here. We're excited to bring you insights that can help improve hiring and retention strategies across healthcare organizations like yours. But before we dive in, just a little bit of housekeeping. If you have a question at any point, please type them into the question box on your control panel. We'll save time at the end to answer as many as we can, and we'll follow up with anything we can that we don't get to live. You'll also find some helpful resources in the handout section of your control panel. Feel free to download those at any time. This includes a 2025 Rogue Hire Benchmark Study Insights Overview and a symplr talent acquisition solution overview. And yes, this session is being recorded. We'll send out a link after the webinar so you can rewatch or share it with others on your team. And here's a quick look at what we'll be covering today. First, we're going to kick things off with the state of hiring in 2025, the macro trends shaping the challenges we're all facing. Then we're going to dive into the 2025 Healthcare Talent Acquisition Benchmark highlights from Rogue Hire's latest industry report. We'll look at what those numbers actually mean for your organization and your recruiting strategy. And finally, we'll connect the dots between insight and action with ideas you can see, take back to your team. I'm sorry, folks, I'm just going to make sure that we are sharing the slides here. I'm so sorry about that, but I hope that you can see my slides now. We have not missed much. So again, here is the agenda. We went over the state of healthcare hiring in 2025. We talked a little bit about the talent acquisition benchmarks. And finally, then we're going to connect the dots between insight and action with ideas you could take back to your team. And then we're going to wrap up with some live Q&A. And then for the speakers today, let's take a moment to introduce them. We have Carissa Fuller. Carissa leads symplr's workforce management pillar and brings over 20 years of experience.
Hi, nice to meet you all. Thanks for having me today.
Helping healthcare organizations improve operational efficiency and talent strategy and workforce outcomes. She'll be setting the stage today with a look at the macro trends impacting hiring and retention across the industry. And then Carla Gold. Carla is an accomplished talent acquisition leader and strategist with deep experience in building high-performing teams and driving operational excellence. She is known for transforming recruiting data and actionable insights and leads Rogue Hire annual healthcare talent acquisition benchmarking program. And then Brian Braza. Brian brings more than 20 years of experience in healthcare operations and AI-driven solutions. At Rogue Hire, he helps hospitals implement the industry's first recruitment operating system to improve hiring efficiency and reducing waste. He holds degrees in economics and Japanese from the University of Michigan and artificial intelligence in healthcare from MIT Sloan. And then Christian Ray, certainly not last, but Christian is a healthcare recruitment coach and co-founder of Rogue Hire. He works with hospitals and health systems to improve recruiting strategies through data, process optimization, and leadership coaching, helping organizations turn talent acquisition into a true strategic advantage. And with that, let's get started. Carissa is going to walk us through the macro trends shaping healthcare hiring in 2025.
Thanks so much, Pat. And I think we're starting with a poll. So you should see a question come up on the screen. What is your organization's biggest workforce challenge right now? If you could select between, or all that apply, hiring fast enough to meet demand, retaining staff long-term, candidate drop-off during hiring, burnout or disengagement, or all of the above. Give everyone just a few seconds to do that. All right. Didn't see the answer go there on the screen, so hopefully Pat can help us with that. But in the meantime, I'm going to talk a little bit about what we're seeing in the market. What some common red flags are in the recruiting process can really be identified. Oh, here it is now. So it's hiring fast enough to meet demand, retaining staff, candidate drop off, followed by all of the above, and then burnout or disengagement. So looks like more of you said hiring fast enough to meet demand and retaining staff long term. So that's good. That must be why you're here today. All right. Let's start with kind of the big picture and some numbers that we're seeing out there with workforce today. If you can move to the slides, Pat. Maybe. All right. Well, workforce shortages are really the top concern for nearly every healthcare executive, actually 95% of them. And it's the previous slide. Yep. We're already feeling it across every single healthcare setting. So we're not talking about a distant threat here. We're talking about something that is a right now problem. And according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, we'll need over 200,000 new registered nurses every year for the rest of the decade just to keep up with demand. Now, I'm really happy to say I have a daughter who is a senior in college. She is a nursing student, so I am giving back to put a nursing student into that need here today, but we need many, many more. So 200,000 new RNs every year for the rest of the decade to keep up with demand. And in workforce, we are still recovering from the last few years. So COVID was a real big dinger on the industry. Nearly 1 in 5 healthcare workers have left the field since 2020. So we're hiring into a smaller, more stressed, and more selective labor pool here, which is scary. Now, on the next slide, turnover isn't just a staffing problem. It's really a margin problem, and I'm sure many CFOs would agree with that. It's a burnout problem. It's a quality of care problem. And nationwide, nearly 1 in 5 nurses turns over every single year. So for every nurse that turns over, it costs the organization about $56,000 when you add up things like recruitment, onboarding, loss of productivity. Now, if you multiply that across an organization, and the average hospital ends up losing somewhere around $6 million a year just due to RN turnover. So solving the hiring problem is not one part, but we can't afford to ignore the retention side of the equation. Today's workforce expectations look really different than they did even just 5 years ago. So according to McKinsey & Company, 70% of healthcare workers say flexibility is now a top priority when considering a new role. And that includes things like schedule flexibility, hybrid models where possible. So we're seeing a lot of hospital systems who are putting together models where people are working both in ambulatory and within the hospital setting, and getting real work-life balance. So people are looking for that, especially as you think about millennials who are in the system now. They're very much looking for work-life balance. Yet only 26% of organizations really feel confident in their ability to use talent data to make improvements. That's just a really big disconnect. And the organizations that are winning in talent aren't just competing on salary. They're investing in things like culture, development opportunities, transparent communication, better candidate experience, and then work-life balance. When we think about the candidate market, it's really flipped. So job seekers are in more control, especially in the healthcare space. Right now, there are 2 open roles for every available healthcare job seeker. And when candidates do apply, up to 40% are dropping out in the middle of the process. And that's not because they're unqualified. That's because the process is slow, it's unclear, it's cumbersome. So candidates are looking for 3 things. They're looking for flexibility in when and how they work, clear career growth and development, as well as fast, transparent communication throughout the hiring process. And if you're not delivering on those expectations, someone else will, a competitor of yours will, and that candidate will move on. So these are some things happening in the market. We've talked about big picture, the hiring challenges, turnover costs, how candidate expectations are shifting. But what does the data say about how healthcare organizations are actually performing? That's where Rogue Hire comes in. They've just released their latest benchmark study. It's packed with huge insights, and I'll hand it over to my friend, Brian Brosda, who I didn't know was a Japanese studier. So that's interesting to know. And he'll dig into the numbers and what they really mean. So over to you, Brian.
Thank you, Carissa. And I think everyone's question is, can Brian still speak Japanese? And the answer is an emphatic no, unfortunately. But I appreciate that, Carissa. Great background, and love the last part about candidate experience. Actually, Christian's going to touch on some pretty insightful data around the hiring process and how candidates feel about it. But to give you a little background on Rogue Hire, for those that don't know us, our journey in healthcare talent acquisition started in 1997. We launched a program called the Recruiter Academy. Over the last 28 years, we've trained tens of thousands of recruiters around the world, and about 8,000 of those specifically in the US healthcare system. That led us to launch a company in 2009 called Lean Human Capital, which many of you probably know as well. And we got our first 3 clients, Cedars-Sinai, Rush University Medical Center, and Texas Health Resources. And collectively, the 4 of us were trying to figure out, what does good look like? If my time to fill is 55 days, is that good or bad? And there was nothing in the healthcare industry that could tell us that. So a year later, in 2010, we launched what you're going to see today, which is the Healthcare Talent Acquisition Benchmark Study. And we have been conducting that study every year for 16 years. Carla, who you met at the beginning of the call, she manages that for us. And Christian is our data guru, who is the wizard behind the curtain of that data. In 2023, we reacquired these brands and launched what is called Rogue Hire. And a year later, Rogue Hire launched the healthcare industry's first recruitment operating system, which is a data visualization and business intelligence tool that connects ATS data to HRIS data, to agency data, to labor and macroeconomic data to give us the insights that we need to make improvements in our hiring process. So if you go to the next one, Pat. I want to just give a quick touch base on where does this data come from that we're going to share with you. So as you look at it, just have in your mind of what this data is generated from. So I'll focus on everything south of the equator. Our 2016 study was our largest ever. It represents 1.1 million positions filled across 17.2 million applications and across 62 unique job categories that represents over 10,000 data points. Carissa touched on some interesting insights on candidate experience. One of the other things that we benchmark in the industry is voice of the customer. So we look at hiring manager satisfaction and candidate experience. And we have over 1 million surveys conducted. So not only do we have benchmarks for speed and efficiency and productivity, but we also have them for candidate experience and hiring manager satisfaction with the recruitment process. Go to the next one, Pat. This I just touched on, but a little more condensed version. We're super excited and proud of this year's study. As I said, it's our largest ever. It's the only kind in the nation of this type of benchmark study for talent acquisition. And this year's data set, which you're going to see, represents 207 health systems that participated in this study. Those health systems are pretty equally spread across size of organizations. So we have large national-based organizations, we have regional-based health systems, and then we have local health systems that may have 1 or 2 hospitals in a local market. Next one, Pat. Here's a quick view of not all the organizations, but some of the organizations that participated in this year's study, just to give you an idea of some names and organizations that participated. The circles that you see colored in, those are our elite honor roll winners. For 15 years, we have been looking at this data and recognizing the organizations that lead the industry. So who has the fastest time to fill? Who has the lowest turnover? Who has the lowest nurse vacancy rate? And the circles that you see colored in are those organizations that won our elite honor roll here for our 2025 study. So from that, I'll kick it to Christian. He's going to get into the data, show you some insights, which is going to give you some things to take back to the office and think about how you're performing.
Appreciate it, Brian. First off, thank you everybody for joining us today to talk a mile deep on healthcare talent acquisition data. You guys had that poll with Carissa to kick it off, and it's kind of a 50-50 split for the attendees around, am I hiring fast enough to meet demand, and am I retaining staff long term? And Brian kind of touched on this, but like, what does fast enough actually mean? And what does long term actually mean? Nobody stays forever, but are we keeping staff longer than others? And are we identifying opportunities for improving those deficiencies? And are we hiring fast enough so that we can have as much control over reducing vacancy, improving patient satisfaction, improving outcomes? That's really what we're up against. It's not necessarily just filling a position, but it's making sure that we have as much leverage on those outcomes for our care partners as possible. So I've got 5 insights here that we're going to talk about. And as Brian mentioned, we've got 10,000 data points in this study. We don't have time to talk about all of them today, but we do go a mile deep into assessing all aspects of performance around talent acquisition and workforce human capital statistics. The first insight that we have, and it's always around speed, talent pressure has shifted, but the challenges are still the same. So although RN applications have increased by 45% just from 2023 to 2024, that has a direct correlation. The more applications I have on the top of the funnel, the faster I can fill positions. And in fact, RN time to fill decreased by 18 days just last year. A lot of contributing factors to why that is, but we still feel the pressure. And that's because the pressure is focused on other areas. So I'm going to give you a poll here. And the question for this poll is around what job category. Now keep in mind, we measure 63 different job categories for healthcare. So what job category is in the top 3 of those 63 for the highest average time to fill? And time to fill is measured from when the rec is approved to when that offer is accepted. So you got 5 options: LPNs, radiology techs, APPs, cardio techs, and direct care RN. Feel free to cast your vote. I would assume many of you are probably still struggling to fill direct care RN, but is it creating the most pressure per individual role? It's probably still the highest volume need that you have, but is it creating the most pressure? Pat, when you think you got enough answers in here, let's go to the results.
Let me know if you can see that, Christian. We got 35% on radiology tech, 32% on direct care RN, and 24% on the cardio tech, with 8% on the
All right, guys. Well, you're spot on with the radiology techs. Radiology tech is, I think it's listed number 3 on the most difficult to fill job out of the 63 job categories for 2025. Direct care RN, as I mentioned, it's still critical to fill, especially by volume. I think in some regard, some direct care RN jobs are easier to fill than others when it comes down to the specialty breakouts. And that's one of the exciting things that we're going to have in 2026 publication, is the ability to break it out by about 12 different specialties that we have available. All right, let's jump to the next slide. If you go back, can you go back one slide? There we go. So these are the 60, I don't think all 63 job categories are shown below, but you can see the #1 most difficult to fill position is the cath lab tech for 2025. Average time to fill here is 83 days, followed by radiology techs. And it's just, yeah, my dogs are going ballistic. FedEx, followed by radiology techs at 83 days as well. And again, it's decimal dust difference between the two. #3, surge techs, physical therapy, polysom techs, sonographers, respiratory therapists, MRI techs. Guys, you see the theme here. Look at the first like 10 categories. All techs. Almost every single one of them is tech. You don't get to direct care RN until you get like to position 12 there. So although yes, it's as critical to fill, but it's not as bad as it was in 2023, and certainly not like it was during COVID. Application volume drives all of the pressure that we experience. Usually when we talk about improving process and improving performance related to time to fill, we break it down into 2 parts. So if you can go to the next slide here. Those 2 parts, like if you look at the bottom, 63 days average time to fill across all jobs, those 2 parts are time to source and time to process. Your time to source is how long did it take me to get the candidate to apply to the job, the candidate that we hired, how long did it take me to get them on the requisition? And on average, out of the 63 days, we spend 44 days just waiting for that application to land in our inbox. Once they apply to the job, we do a fairly good job of processing them at 19 days. Top performers are probably around 11 days. And usually the difference between top performers and median performers is simple things like direct schedule. Are we advocating for the candidate? Are we engaging with the candidate and putting them directly on the manager's calendars? So overall, it's not a process problem, it's a sourcing problem. When we do look at the average time to fill for a position, nobody experiences the average. I know you don't, your candidates don't, your hiring managers don't. Nobody experiences the 63. What they experience is the variation. And that's why we break it down by BAU and CDV. BAU is business as usual. You can pretty much predict that next week you're going to have an EVS opening and 2 food and nutrition openings. It's clockwork, and you get candidates that usually line up, and it's very easy to recruit for these roles. Many times they also turn over very quickly too. On the flip side, you have your CDV. This is what defines a recruitment team. This is what they're talking about at the water cooler. This is what they're talking about in the C-suite. And this is where your agency and your premium pay and your vacancy and all of the inability to grow as an organization is usually stemming from. So 33% of your positions are defined by critical, difficult, and visible, and the average time across the entire industry to fill these positions is 131 days. Next slide. Now, I've talked several times now about being able to have enough candidates in your funnel. And this looks at the volume of candidates and the speed associated with getting a qualified candidate. So we aren't just looking at, do I have X number of applications? We're looking at, out of the applications I get, how often am I able to route a candidate to the manager? Usually if you're routing the candidate to the manager, there's a pretty good chance that that candidate is qualified for the role. For cath lab techs, it's taking 42 days on average to route a single candidate. So when those managers want a slate of 3 candidates to be able to make a hiring decision, you're going to wait 126 days just to get to that slate of 3, and then you're going to have to interview and offer and onboard. So realistically, you may have that position vacant for 9 months before you can actually fill it. Radiology techs average 34 days to route a single candidate. Respiratory therapists, 33 days. If you look over on the end, hey, we're doing really good in talent acquisition. It's only taking us 6 days. What's going on there? it might have a lot of factors related to culture and our teams and driving referrals. There's a lot of things that we can learn about our own recruitment and talent acquisition that we can then apply to other areas of our own organization. Go ahead, next slide. The second of 5 insights takes me back to manufacturing. So my roots are industrial engineering, started at General Motors. It's not a talent shortage in many respects. It's an inventory management problem. So you may or may not be familiar with the term candidate inventory. It's a measure of time. It's how many days does it take between when the candidate first lands in our applicant tracking system before they apply to the job that we end up hiring them on. Candidates, sometimes they come and apply for a couple jobs, they don't hear back, they get rejected. It might be 2 years, and then for whatever reason, they engage with us again and we ended up hiring them. We knew about that candidate for 24 months, but we didn't do anything with the knowledge that we had from that relationship. So 43% of external candidates are known candidates. And we're defining known as we knew about them for more than 90 days. If they apply to a job and we end up hiring them within a 90-day window, we're going to chalk that up to recruitment marketing. And that's an effort that still needs attention, but it's working and it's driving fresh blood into the top of the funnel, and then we can engage. The other part of this is the known candidate. The average known candidate is in your applicant tracking system for 1,052 days before they apply to the job that you end up hiring them on. And this is true for RNs, it's true for EVS. And if you think about it like this, these candidates are expressing loyalty to your organization. And that's a different concept to think about in terms of not just employee loyalty, but candidate loyalty. They've told you for years that they want to come work for you. They're not going to keep knocking on the door. If they have one bad experience, they get a no rejection letter or an automated rejection letter, they probably aren't going to come back. And that's our opportunity to engage, build a relationship, and find the value prop for engaging and hiring that individual. Next slide, Pat. Building on what we talked about with the kind of sources of hires. Overall benchmark median statistics are what you're looking at here. So 39% of all hires last year came from internal candidates. That's great. We don't want to be too high. We don't want to be too low. We want to promote internal mobility. The second, which we talked about, 27% of your applicants are known externals, where they have applied with us in the past. They have engaged with us in the past. We have had opportunity to build relationships, to build pipelines, to build those silver medalists. And where most of our energy gets concentrated is around the new external candidates, which comprises of about 1 out of 3 of our hires that we have for our positions. We spend on average $1.2 million as an organization on our recruitment marketing efforts to find these candidates. Are we spending the same amount of money, dollar for dollar, hire for hire, on our known externals? Probably not. We're probably running our recruitment teams to the bone so that they don't have time to manage those relationships. We need to make sure that we're staffed appropriately so that we can build, cultivate, and harvest those candidates that have applied in the past. And then also, likewise, our internal mobility. How much effort are we putting in there to predict the fact that we're going to have internal movement? And are we listening to the right employees at the right time and giving them opportunities to grow before we offer it to the externals? So this slide forces you to think about the strategy. It forces you to think about the systems and the processes associated with where our hires are coming from. Next slide. The third insight from 2025 is that internal mobility is up, and at the same time, tenure is down. So overall, internal transfers are up by 7%. And if you think about internal transfer rates, it's not just increasing from 32% to 39%. That increase of 7% probably has a 15 to 20% compounding effect on the volume of hires that we have, because it's musical chairs. We open one position, we fill it with an internal, what happens? Well, now I need to fill that next position. If that gets filled by an internal, I may fill that same position 4 times before I finally plug the leaking bucket with an external hire. And that's the only way that you're actually going to reduce vacancy. So think about internal transfer rates like an interest rate. The higher it goes, the more compounding effect that it's going to have. The second part around the tenure is also important. So we can look at annual turnover, 90-day turnover, we can look at retention measures, but what I care about is how long are my staff staying with me, those that are currently employed, and are we tracking that? When we look at the median, 6.7 years across all job categories was the average tenure of an actively employed employee across the data set. And I think this data set had like 17 million employees in it. Between 2024 and 2025 publications, that tenure slipped by almost a full year. Not for everybody. Top 10 percentile, it barely moved. A little bit on top 25th, it's down across the board. But when we look at the bottom 10th percentile, losing 1.2 years, and now you're cycling your employees 20% faster, my question is are we accounting for that volume and that churn as a recruitment team? Because if you're now having to fill jobs at a 20% higher clip, do we have 20% more investment into recruitment marketing? Do we have 20% more investment into sourcing, 20% more into my staff time that it takes to secure and move candidates through the process? Knowing whether or not you have a recruitment problem, a retention problem, or a mixture of both is critical to staffing your team for success and resourcing it for success. And also knowing where those gaps are coming from. So we can take the workforce data that you see here, you can break it down by all 62 different job categories, and you can look at each individual job category against its own benchmark. Just in the bottom table here, break your data down by generation. How is generation X, Y, and Z performing to each other? What we're seeing in a common theme across the entire industry is that Gen Z has absolutely no loyalty to our organization. And if we look at the measure of 2024 retention, that's all the way there on the right, 57% of our Gen Z workforce survived 2024. That means that, hey, if they were employed January 1st, 2024, and they made it to 12/31/2024, we retained them. Only 57% made it across the finish line. It's a startling statistic when you think about, is that just a trend with a younger generation, or is that the new trend that we're going to expect because we haven't built the loyalty that we need, and we haven't focused on the culture that we need in order to be successful? So again, when you ask the question on Carissa's survey, am I retaining my staff long-term? Tenure is a great way to assess that. Am I at 4.2 years or am I at 9.1 years? Because those who are performing in the top 10th are twice as successful as those that are performing in the bottom 10th. Let's go to the next slide, Pat. All right. One of the things that talks to our areas of opportunity is when we split the data down by roles that align with revenue generation. And out of the 62 categories that we measure on, there's about 22 of them that we can quantify what does a day of vacancy actually mean and how much of an impact does it have in our bottom line. So direct care RN, of course, medical assistants, APPs, rad techs, anything that you know if you have somebody and there's a vacancy and we can't perform a task or it's taking us longer or we have to defer to a different date, that's a revenue generating role. Now, every role is critical, but these are the roles that we need to make sure that we're playing Moneyball with, staffing appropriately, and gamifying our entire system so that we're all at top box on these measurements. We can't afford not to be. Next slide. The fourth insight is all around candidate experience, and we quantify this both qualitatively and quantitatively. So for the qualitative measure, we produced the Voice of Customer survey. This is a survey that goes out on a regular basis to our hiring managers, our new hires, and more specifically, our non-hired candidates. Our non-hired candidates have a terrible experience. Across the industry, 60% of all non-hired candidates are either dissatisfied or indifferent about the recruiting process. And the problem with that, yeah, we didn't hire them, what do we care? Well, there's two problems. Number one, they're not going to come back. Number two, they're not going to refer anybody else. And number three, actually three problems, they're not going to choose to come to our organization as a healthcare delivery provider. They're going to choose to go somewhere else because they had a terrible experience. And that's a real threat to the bottom line. So we need to make sure that we treat every candidate with as much respect as we would if it were to be one of our relatives applying to our jobs. The quantitative side of the candidate experience is all around the Stuck report. So we take this data, we can take it right from PM11. We want to know on a daily basis, are we moving our trains on time? And being able to evaluate this at the application level is critical. Knowing what % of my candidates that are active on an open requisition that needs to be filled haven't moved in 21 days or more. We use 21 not because it's where we want you to be. It's not because that defines any SLA. I think everybody on this call could all agree that if a candidate hasn't moved in 21 days, we probably have an opportunity that would be in line with what we would define as gross negligence in our process. And that's why we talk about 21 days. We need to talk more about 7 days. 30% of my candidates have moved in the last 7 days. We wouldn't even have an SLA that goes out to 7 days. So why are we accepting bottlenecks and stalls in our process that take more than 3 weeks? There could be real reasons why you have more than 21 days. It's a cohort hiring process, graduate nurse recruitment, we hire in batches. Those are an exception. What we're talking about is the positions that actually need to get filled, and we're probably just waiting on whatever part of the process needs to occur next. And sometimes it's in the control of your recruiters, sometimes it's not, but understanding where the bottleneck is critical to making sure that we are reducing our time to fill, which was the #1 opportunity on Chris's chart there. Am I hiring fast enough to meet demand? That we need to have as much control over that as possible, because it's not about time to fill. That's done, it's over with, it's in the past, it's a lagging measure. This is a leading measure that everybody can take control of, and you can gamify it. Let's get your entire staff positioned around these measurements and making it fun to come into work every day and seeing how you're doing. When I go home at night, am I winning or am I losing? And this is a leading indicator that helps us feel good about the quality of work that we're delivering. Next slide. All right, fifth and final insight from 2025 is that revenue generating roles are still a problem. Now, if you participated in the benchmark study, you're going to have grids that look like this. 35% of revenue generating roles take more than 145 days to fill. If you look at that second line there, out of the 8,000 jobs that this organization filled, 3,000 align with revenue. It takes them 54 days on average time to fill. Their time to source is 41 days, kind of in line with where we're at with the time to source overall. But what's more important here is our time to process, which is something that you have complete control over, is higher than it is for your non-revenue generating roles. And that's because the non-revenue, those managers are probably used to hiring on a regular basis. It's clockwork. They do it regularly. The revenue generating roles, we may not have that mentality and that behavior and those systems ingrained into our daily operations. There's no reason that your time to process for a revenue role shouldn't be 10 days. That's probably benchmark top 25th when it comes to that level of performance. There's some aspects of this that are controllable, some are not. Am I getting enough applications per hire? When we focus on recruitment marketing, when we focus on sourcing, we need to put way more pressure on these jobs than we do overall. It's one thing to say, I've got 7.9 applications per hire on all jobs, and it's another to say, I only have 4.9 on my revenue roles, and out of that 4.9, I'm only routing 2.9 candidates on average to my hiring managers to make a decision. These roles are critically important, and we need to make sure that we're resourcing them appropriately, because if we don't fill these jobs with utmost urgency, you're not going to need the non-revenue roles. So make sure that you can segment by priority the roles that are causing the most pain on the bottom line. And it also gives you what you need to create ROI business cases for getting the right number of staff, the right resources, the right investments, the right technology for making sure that you can deliver against your organizational KPIs. Next slide. One of the benefits of participating in the benchmark is you get to see your data and interact with your data. The program that we have is called ROS. It stands for Recruitment Operating System, and it's about making decisions and having decision intelligence ingrained into how we tell our stories. It's not necessarily move faster, move harder, fill that funnel. It's isolated, strategic, laser-pointed decisions that we need to make that says, if I focus on this part of the process, if I focus on this problem, if I focus on this service line at this location, I'm going to have the largest impact on the return of my resources and my time for delivering top quality outcomes against benchmark. So I'm going to turn it over to Carla to talk more about ROS and the benchmark study.
Thanks, Christian. So we've summarized, as Christian did well, 10,000 benchmark data points in this year's study, and we've shared the highlights. And as Christian mentioned, for our premium member customers and clients, all of the benchmarks, the insights, looking at revenue versus non-revenue generating positions is available. But from today and what we've shared thus far, where can you start? And what can you take from these insights to understand your current state and your team's performance? Well, it starts with the data. And our recommendation is to analyze your ATS and look for reports where you can pull rec details for fill jobs. Go deeper than the overall time to fill, which, as Christian talked about, doesn't tell the whole story of how talent acquisition is performing, but look at those positions that are filled in less than 60 days, greater than 60 days, and our time to process versus time to source. Segment those jobs by the revenue generating titles, where we're using premium labor in your organization is one recommendation. Like, do we have the data? Can we drill into the data that way? Additionally, identifying your ATS, and most ATSs have the data available, it's just getting at it. The last update or movement date on active candidates on your open requisitions. An active candidate is those still under consideration that haven't been rejected, but to understand where they are at a snapshot in step and status, how long they've been there, and especially for those candidates that haven't moved in the 21 plus days, what are we doing? What are we implementing? How are we managing candidate workflow so we remove barriers and bottlenecks in our process? And then if you're not measuring customer satisfaction today against all three of healthcare TA customers, managers, new hires, transfers, and non-hires, we highly recommend that you do, especially if you're looking to implement any change management or process improvement initiatives. You need to understand how your customer feels about the experience. And then, of course, you want to have benchmarks so you have true perspective of how you're performing against the rest of the industry. So it does start with the data, and we work with a lot of organizations, and we understand it can be challenging to maybe create the reports or find the data elements in your system and to do so efficiently, and then to understand what the data means. We have worked with just about every applicant tracking system platform out there to be able to extract meaningful data from organizations. And that's where Rogue Hire can really partner with you to get at that data in your ATS or HRIS platforms for analysis. Next slide, please. We've had a long-standing partnership and valued partnership with symplr over the years. And for those symplr clients that are using the S-Recruit applicant tracking system, you actually already have the reports built in your system that you can quickly run that provides the key data points needed where Rogue Hire can actually assess your performance, provide your metrics, and a comprehensive insight report to you of how your team's performing today. compared to the benchmarks that we've shared today. The reports are master rec, master application, and then a custom report we partnered with symplr to create. It's called the Recruitment Benchmark Raw Data Report. So these collectively will pull the necessary data points for all filled jobs, open recs, and active candidates on those open requisitions. We've already identified the field, so you have improved kind of data integrity, having the data at the rec level, in the individual candidate level, which is going to give you better quality data and benchmarks for comparison. And most organizations on the SRecruit ATS can run these in usually 5 minutes. So very simple, easy to run, and again, easy submission to Rogue Hire for a complementary analysis, which I'm going to talk about here in just a second. Next slide. This is a view for those SRecruit users where you can see in the new report section, the 3 reports I just mentioned. So master rec, the recruitment benchmark raw data report, and the third is the master application. So it's as easy as running the report, entering the date range, and being able to export to Excel. And from there, we can provide a very comprehensive analysis of filled jobs, active recs, or active candidates, and open requisitions. Next slide, please. So how does your team compare? Not only against these top 5 insights that we shared, but overall, when it comes to filled jobs, open recs, active candidates, there are a lot of data points we didn't cover today. And we'd love to offer you all the opportunity to take advantage of a complimentary analysis. Whether you're an SRecruit or any applicant tracking platform, this analysis, again, will allow you to have a good current state assessment of how you're performing today compared to the rest of the industry, compared to top performing and elite level organizations. And we'll also provide back to you with the analysis some recommendations for improvement, where to start, what are the top 5 opportunities, and things that you and your team can work on for the rest of 2025 to improve performance outcomes. So if there's more interest in understanding what's involved in this complementary analysis, don't hesitate to reach out to us to learn more. And I will turn it back over to Carissa.
All right, thanks so much, Carla. So what we've really seen today is that data can be incredibly powerful, but only if you're doing something with it. So if you're interested in that complementary analysis, please reach out to Rogue Hire. They'd be more than happy to help you with that. And also benchmarking. So benchmarking helps to see where your process is strong, but where it's also falling short, and where you can improve hiring speed, candidate experience, and ultimately retention. At symplr, we know healthcare isn't like other industries. That's why our talent management solution is actually built specifically for healthcare. From frontline hiring to leadership development, if you're trying to improve speed, retention, engagement, and also get those benchmark data, we'd love to show you how we at symplr can help you there. So with that, I will turn it over to Pat for questions.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Carissa. Thank you, everyone from Rogue Hire. We do have a few questions that have come in. If anybody does have questions that they haven't yet put into, kind of the queue, feel free to add those into the question section on the control panel. But we'll kind of get started with a few that are in the hopper right now. The first question that we have, this might be more for the Rogue Hire team. It says, from your perspective, what is the most overlooked recruiting metric healthcare organizations should be paying attention to, and why?
Carla or Brian, I don't know if you have an opinion on this. I always feel like the most important measure is your hiring manager satisfaction. It tells you a lot of things. It's not just are they satisfied, but you're delivering quality outcomes consistently through the evaluation of that qualitative assessment. And the other part about that, it's against benchmark. You benchmark your qualitative VOC, voice of customer, against a statistically validated question set that hits on all dimensions of recruitment delivery. If I had to pick one measure that I knew if I did that really well, I wouldn't even need to see the rest of them because I know that I'm delivering on those. That for me has always been the North Star.
Excellent. Thank you, Christian. Any other thoughts on that before I move on to the next one is, how can HR leaders best use benchmark data to get buy-in from leadership on new tools or process changes?
The cool thing about data is not only can you benchmark, but you can also look at your performance at before and after changes. Whether it's a change that you're putting in place or whether it's something that somebody else in our community has put in place. What does my data show for before and after, whether it's a hard change or a soft change, a process change, a compensation change? It's always good to know I'm putting this change in place to have leverage on what outcome. And you need to be able to tell your story. Like that's what shows the confidence and the competence and builds more stronger relationships with the C-suite when you can tell your story through that data lens. So being able to show the before and the after and having that structure of data behind the story where you can not just visually show it, but you can show with empirical evidence that I did improve it and here's the outcomes. And oftentimes when you can tie it down to the bottom line and you can show what's happening for the impact for those types of roles or the increase in speed, that's where you can begin to get more momentum for more investment and more relationships with those C-suite individuals. That's like, yep, there's Pat again with what he wants to do. He's shown it time over time that the improvements that he's made has had quantifiable outcomes. I'll invest in him any day. I mean, that's where you need to be. It's an absolute necessary for building common language across the entire organization.
Great, thank you. And then kind of follow up on that, are there some common red flags you see in the recruiting process that can be identified through benchmarking?
Carla, do you want to take that one?
Definitely. There's a few. We look at offer acceptance rate. That's one we didn't talk about it today, but that's one of the metrics that we measure and benchmark against. So looking at that, understanding an organization's process, how they track candidate activity in the system, whether that tracking is ideal or not, we see the outcomes in the data and we work with the organization to improve their processes so that the data, one, is clean, and then the benchmark for comparison is more relevant and meaningful for them. So yes, there's some organizations that have either unique processes or it's just the way they've always done it. Definitely moving candidates through step in status is important so that you have accuracy in the data that you're exporting or running reports on. With respect to cycle times, offer acceptance rate, candidates that are routed to hiring manager, we measure that as the route to hire ratio. There are some flags and some things that we see in some organizations in their process. So the better you track step status and activity in the applicant tracking system, the more valid and credible your data will be.
Great, thank you. And I like this next question. It says, kind of like given everything we've covered today, what should a talent acquisition leader start if they want to make a quick impact after everything we've learned today? Are there any kind of, again, just tomorrow you come into work, what should you start doing?
My advice is if you haven't participated in the benchmark, it's free.
Yep.
We're not trying to sell you anything. It's literally, you can have the full 62 category analysis across as many dimensions as you'll give us data for. And to give you the advice, start here, when that's not a problem. We want to make sure that your efforts are focused on the problems where I'm below benchmark, low 25th performance in comparison, because just to get the median, sometimes it's just as simple as learning something from something that somebody's already doing. Like it's not a silver bullet that you're looking for. It's usually, how do I mimic that? How do I at least get to benchmark median? And then how do I get to top 25th? going from median to top 25th, you're talking about behavior changes. It's not just what you need to change, but it's changing ingrained behaviors that are on your team or outside the control. It might be with the hiring managers or others, but benchmarks will tell you all of that.
Great. And then just a question on the benchmarks that I saw come in. It says, does the benchmark also assist with setting metrics for recruiter operations activity?
For when I hear operations activity, I'm thinking everything that's in process. 9 times out of 10, when we look at what's going on in process, your standard work is the first thing that needs to be addressed. So we can't see the forest through the trees. You've got, let's say, 65% of your candidates stalled more than 3 weeks. Yeah, we need to get to the point of having SLAs, but we just need your recruiters to start cleaning up their desk. Let's start dispositioning everybody that hasn't moved in more than 300 days. Like, I say that kind of tongue in cheek, but that's the reality. Like, we need to make sure that your recruiting system, S-Recruit, is the source of truth. And if you can't do that, you can't measure your operations. It needs to be that source, and we need to build better behaviors, better habits, and oftentimes it requires change at the individual contributor level. Now, once you get it cleaned up, yeah, let's set SLAs. Let's make sure we've got strong, robust standard work that, hey, if it's been 3 days and I don't have a response, we've got escalation processes in place. Because some of your jobs, especially those that are tied to agency and overtime and premium pay, they need that faster urgency turnaround, but you can't see it if you can't measure it.
Great, thank you, Christian. And I know we're kind of running up here on the last, minute. So, we will get to the questions. We'll send you a response if we haven't gotten to your questions, individually. But I want to thank you all so much for joining us today. We hope this session gave you valuable insight into the challenges and opportunities shaping healthcare hiring in 2025, and that you're really walking away with a few new ideas to support your talent strategy. Obviously, it goes without saying, a big thank you to our speakers for sharing their time and experience. And just a reminder, a recording of today's presentation will be sent out to all registrants via email, so keep an eye out for that. And if you'd like to rewatch it or share with someone on your team. And before we go, we'd also love to invite you to our next event. We'll be hosting an open house webinar on Wednesday, July 31st at 12 p.m. Central Time, where you can get a closer look at our symplr talent acquisition solution and how it supports better hiring outcomes in healthcare. Details will be included in the follow-up email as well. And thank you again so much for spending part of your day with us, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you so much, everyone, and we'll hear from you soon.